And now another take on the question of military intervention in Syria. It comes from our own Margaret Warner, who's in Cairo tonight, getting reaction from there and around the Mideast. I spoke to her a short time ago. Margaret, welcome. So tell us about the reaction you've been getting from people there so far about a possible U.S. strike against Syria.
Jeff, I've only been here 24 hours, and I have to say I've been surprised at the unanimity with which people here are opposed to the idea of a U.S. military strike on Syria, despite the fact that some people here believe Assad probably did use chemical weapons. People here say it will just cause more instability in the region, and they mention everything from more refugees to strengthening jihadi forces inside the rebel forces in Syria. And there's really, at the root of it, there is really great distrust of the United States, both its past actions in the Middle East and its motives for even considering this.
So you're saying they might well believe that the Assad regime used chemical weapons, but this really comes down to their feelings of, first and foremost, about the U.S.
It really does, Jeff. I mean, some people said to me, you got it wrong. The United States got it wrong about Iraq. You told the world there were weapons of mass destruction being made, and they were not. So there are many people here who even doubt the intelligence that the Obama administration has presented with such kind of authority and confidence this time. So I'd say that's a larger group. But I spoke to a young man last night who actually believes Bashar Assad did it. He said, we saw all those bodies on television. But still, he does not, nobody here that I've spoken to, and I don't mean there isn't anybody, trusts the United States and wants the United States to intervene once again in another Arab country. They all point to the example of Iraq in a second way, which is the United States went in to rid Iraq of a dictator, and look what we got. Look what this region got, which is Iraq in disarray, sectarian violence within Iraq, and now, as we know, exporting jihadi elements back into Syria, Sunni extremists. And Egypt's dealing with their own jihadi elements in the Sinai. So whether it's for practical reasons or on the level of trust in the United States' motives, I just did not hear anyone who had confidence that the United States could act effectively and was doing it really with the region's interests at heart.
And what about, Margaret, the president's announcement this weekend that while he wants to do it, he would go to Congress, which will delay things for a bit? What kind of reaction, if any, did you get on that?
Well, on that, it really, to the average man on the street, that had barely penetrated. To people, former parliamentarians, people who are political activists, I'm thinking of 3 different people of that sort I spoke to, they were split. One person said to me, that really conveys a certain weakness. I mean, President Obama may say it's because of the American democratic system, and we know the reasons he gave. But here, in some quarters, it was seen as a sign of weakness. But another person, an activist, a pro-democracy activist, said, well, actually, I think to restrain yourself when you say you have the power and believe you have the power shows strength, not weakness. So there's a little bit of a split on that, but really that is not the important prism through which people here are looking at it.
Now, the president, of course, is hoping for support from that part of the world, particularly through the Arab League. Where do things stand with that?
Well, not encouragingly for the Obama administration, because, as you said, the Obama administration hoped that just as with the action in Libya, they would be acting in concert not only with some European partners, but with the Arab League. So the Arab League, last week, I think it was, met and essentially held Assad, said Assad should be held to account and was critical of Assad, stopped short of military action. This week, starting yesterday, they had an emergency meeting, which they moved up from later in the week to reconsider the question. But what came out, the first readings looked like, oh, they're now really calling on the international community to do something. But when you look at the text, and I spoke to people both in the Egyptian government and in the Arab League, they say the important thing about today's announcement was, yes, we're calling on the United Nations and the international community to take some sort of deterrent action or deterrent measures against the use of chemical weapons by the regime, but that the only legal basis for military action is under either the UN Charter of Self-Defense or by a vote of the Security Council, which, as one Egyptian official admitted to me, in a practical sense, that's not going to happen because of Russia's opposition. And so it is interesting that on 2 points. One, Egypt's long been an ally of the United States, is not acting in concert with the U.S. here. Egypt was the first to come out last week and say they were opposed to the use of force. And secondly, that Marwan Muasher, who's the former foreign minister of Jordan, said to me today, it's interesting that the only Arab leaders in a full-throated way calling for U.S. military action are the ones without elected parliaments. That is, they are the governments that don't feel they have to be responsive to their people, and that is some of these Gulf kingdoms. And that whether it's Jordan or Egypt and other states which do have aroused publics now, and since the Arab Spring, an even more activist public, they are not willing to go there.
All right, Margaret Warner in Cairo for us tonight. Thanks so much.
My pleasure, Jeff.
And there's much more online where we continue our Syria coverage, including on our world page, a dispatch from Margaret in Cairo.